All right.
Woo!
Live in the studio.
In person.
It's here. Oh my gosh. How's everyone doing tonight? I am so excited. I'm excited to see you in person.
I know, right?
It's been a while. We've had a lot of Zooms.
A lot of Zooms.
A lot of FaceTime.
A lot of FaceTime.
But to see you, and you look lovely as always.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to put on a little lipstick. You know how much lipstick I've gotten on the inside of my mask?
We are, we're super excited to be here. As you can see, I've kind of redesigned the studio. I've put us 6 feet apart, which we're very excited to make this work. And, you know, full transparency, both our kids are in schools and were tested just this past week. So we are thankfully have 2 negatives, which means, knock on wood, we are most likely probably okay. So, at least us. I am Tony DiTerlizzi. This is my unbelievably good friend and co-conspirator, award-winning best-selling author, Holly Black.
Woo!
We've known each other for
maybe 25 years.
Almost 25 years. Maybe possibly 25 years. That's like a college. That's a college graduate.
That's like a college graduate. And I have been summoned here to grill Tony.
You're gonna grill me.
So we are going to take questions,
Yep.
you know, but mostly we're here to talk about Tony's new book, The Fantastic Kenny of the Book of Beasts.
Yes, it's a shameless plug, really, Holly, is what it is. And we're in a different new time, so, you know, I'm not on book tour, you're not on tour, normally.
You are on book tour, my friend.
And because Holly's here and we're so excited, we thought for sure we should do giveaways. I usually try to do a giveaway during my stream, especially during the Draw to Fantasy stream that we did over the spring. I'd love to give, of course, a special shout out to all the Drawn to Fantasy, the fans of fantasy.
Woo!
Thank you guys. So Holly and I are going to sign this edition of the Spiderwick Field Guide at the end. Angela's here. She's going to pick a special winner. I will definitely do a drawing in it. And so tune in, stay tuned, and maybe you can get this fancy book that you can sell on eBay for $5 to $6. Yeah.
You guys are going to do a Q&A as well, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna
Right.
talk, and then I feel like we.
Then whatever you want to know, whatever, ask him.
But Holly and I we talk about all kinds of stuff too. And I remember the other day when we were talking, I was like, oh, I just want to capture some of our conversation where we're talking about all kinds of stuff. Did you watch this? Have you seen this? Like I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I need to know your thoughts on Dark Crystal 2 not getting a second season. Yeah.
Bitter.
Yeah.
Bitter and angry.
Yeah. No. I guess I won't wait. Now we know. We both feel the same. Exactly the same on that. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know how to segue from that to.
All right.
Kenny
Well,
the Book.
let me first say that in Kenny and the Book of Beasts, we meet a more mature Kenny Rabbit.
Oh.
He has a lot of sisters, and he is grappling with what it means to be a good friend and a good person.
Yeah.
And you know, things that came more easily to him when he was younger, and it's about magic and wonder, and I really, really loved it.
Aww.
And so I thought, take us back before that, though. Tell us how you came to write Kenny and the Dragon.
To Kenny and the Dragon. The
Yeah,
first
yeah.
one.
Let's go back. Go back to the beginning.
To the mists of time.
Because it's 2008, I believe. I looked inside the book and it said 2008. That seemed right.
That was like peak Spiderwick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of interesting that you know we've come in a big circle and here we are. And it was we were riding high in the world of Spiderwick. There was a lot going on. The movie was either out or getting ready to come out.
That was 2008. So I don't know when
Early.
Kenny came out.
Oh, Kenny
vis-a-vis, you know.
Late, actually, you know what? There's a little code on the flap that will tell you exactly when it came out. It came out in August. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah, there's a little tiny code. If you look in the bottom, you know this code, right? If you open the flap up.
No.
You don't know this.
I didn't.
There's a little tiny code in the bottom of the flap, right there. A lot of books have them. And this one says 8/8, so it came out in August of 2008.
Oh, so right after.
Right after, yeah. So, you know, I remember being, there was a Peter Pan sequel that was being made at Simon & Schuster right around the same time, or maybe a year before. And there was a lot of conversation, because I'm a huge fan of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Peter Pan and Wonderful Wizard of Oz and all these things. And so I think our incredible editor, Kevin Lewis, and the team at Simon & Schuster knew this, and they were thinking maybe I could, on the heels of Spiderwick, do a classic, tell a classic story. And I thought long and hard about that. And Alice in Wonderland has always been something that's been very near and dear to my heart. And I remember a couple things happening. One, I remember talking to Brian Selznick, and we must have been at some convention or function, and Brian gave me this. He would have been working on the invention of Hugo Cabret at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And he gave me this little tiny bit of advice, and it still rings true to this day to me. He said, you could illustrate one of those classics, and it would be amazing, but you'll never be Sir John Tenniel, the original illustrator of Alice in Wonderland, or you'll never be W.W. Denslow. But I think it's our job as modern storytellers to tell new stories, to tell new versions of those types of stories. And that really got me thinking, and I think, as you know, because I usually have 12 things going on at once, that definitely fueled like Wandla and stuff that I would do afterwards. But at the time, we were talking about one of my favorite short stories called The Reluctant Dragon, written by Kenneth Graham. And that was part of an anthology called Dream Days, I believe. And it was just a little short story. And I really wanted to see if we could make a fancy published version of that little short story. And I remember calling Kevin up and saying, I don't know if I want to re-illustrate anything, but could we do this really beautiful version of The Reluctant Dragon? It had illustrations by Ernest Shepard, known famously for the Winnie the Pooh books and Wind in the Willows. And I said, maybe I can colorize, like watercolor onto them and write a little forward. And Kevin goes, yeah, I think you'd have to re-illustrate it. And I was like, maybe.
You're like, I'm so busy.
Yeah, I got this Spiderwick thing going on. And then he was like, let me read it over the weekend and think on it. And then he was like, I remember him calling me like in the middle of the week, and he said, I think you'd have to retell it. And I was like, oh, no, I don't have time for that. Like, we got all these Spiderwick stuff that's, and he's like, just write a chapter. Just write a chapter, then you'll know. And I remember spending the weekend, right, Ange? I remember literally sitting up at the kitchen and just becoming obsessed with all the ways I would write this book. And it was my manager, Ellen Goldsmith-Bain, who came up with the idea of mashing Wind in the Willows with it, because originally it was going to be modern day kid, like a modern day kid, and then a dragon shows up. So take it out of the medieval, but I couldn't make that work. And then she said, what about if you made it like Wind in the Willows with a dragon, which is just a stroke of genius. And then I knew I had it, and I was off.
So the story Stone Soup, where they go around and they get all this different stuff. It's like Kevin Stone Souped you. He was doing
good at that. That's it. It's true.
Even now your laugh is a little bit like I got God. So,
I think you used to call it cornswoggled.
We got hornswoggled a lot.
You did back in those days?
Yes, we did. We'd show up at a school thinking we were just going to talk to 100 kids, and all 1,000 kids are here. They can't wait for you to eat lunch with them. Hornswoggled. Not that we didn't want to do it, but
We loved every So, what made you want to come back to that world, to write Cunny and the Book of Beasts? And I think I was especially interested in the fact that, when you went into this, you had an idea that was kind of a retelling. Not maybe a straightforward retelling, but like a retelling.
Leaning heavy.
And, now you're coming back, and you don't have that.
Yeah.
So what made you want to hornswoggle yourself into doing it?
Evan Lord said cornswoggle, just so you guys know.
We like to make it our own.
I think, you probably have this, I'm guessing you have this as well. Do you have inertia when the book is done and you've been obsessing over it for months or a year, and then you're like, okay, it's off, but you still can't stop thinking about it because you're so conditioned to be thinking about it and working on it every single day, especially in those final, as you approach one of the big deadlines, you're still thinking about it. And I have that.
I feel like my mind, no, in all seriousness, I feel like my mind clears and suddenly I realize all of these things that I either haven't done or haven't noticed. I'm like, oh my God, I'm living in filth. Someone should have told, like I need to burrow out of this nest. But like, I really do feel like it's the only time when I have my full brain, because then you start the new project and then all of a sudden, half your brain is processing that.
Yes. Well, but okay, so mine takes longer to disengage then. It's like, I'll come down, part of my ritual actually is clean the studio. Like, to your point, I'll take all the stuff off the bulletin board, I kind of pick up things, I answer all the email that's backed up, but the gears behind my brain are still going, and there were things that we cut from the first book that didn't make it, and there were questions that I kept asking myself. The one is, in the first book, Kenny's dad dresses up as a wizard, and pretends to be a wizard, and has the enchantificated pitchfork, which meant to me there's magic. They've accepted that there's actual magic, not just dragons or mythical creatures, but at some point there was or still remains magic in this little world that I've made. And so I wondered what form does that take? How does that manifest? So that was a huge question. The other big one was, if Graham keeps talking about things, and George talks about things in the past as if there were dragons and mythological creatures everywhere, and now they're all gone. Where did they all go? I want to know where they all are. So I was left with a couple of those questions, and I had this drawing. I should post it, actually. I haven't posted it, but I did a possum witch right after I did Kenny and the Dragon, and it was like...
So like you were asking yourself all these questions in 2008 or 2007 when you actually finished, probably, right?
Right, yep.
And you had all these ideas, and then you said, no, not right now.
No, there's no Spiderwick. We were probably embarking on the Beyond books at that point.
I think you're probably right.
And those were on a pretty crazy schedule. Yeah. So off I went, and then from there I went to Wonderland, and then I think to the second half of your question, I felt more confident of a writer by then. I felt like I think I can write this. I don't have to lean as heavily on a retelling, because it is a retelling. I mean, I think let's be honest, it's a retelling of Kenneth's original story, and I needed that at that time. I think it was a good skeletal structure for me to kind of lean on and then reskin in my own Tony D way. And so, and I think, coming out of Spiderwick, and I know you and I have talked about this before, because our roles were blurred on it, how we worked was so unusual. I think it was a yearning to be like, I can write. I want to show people I know how to write, And so it was important to me at the time, and I needed it to become more confident in myself as a writer, so I can embark on something as absolutely lunatic and ambitious as Wonderland, because that was a lot of story. So.
Well, that takes me to this question, which is, can you talk about your writing process when it doesn't involve me?
I think they probably want to know what the writing process is when it doesn't.
Well, I want to know what it's like.
Just silence and crying alone without you. It's not a whole lot different in the beginning part. So it's sketching characters, which I think a lot of people probably know. I try to sketch the protagonists and figure out what they are, and then I start those little notes around them. And this, if people don't know, Holly and I's collaboration on Spiderwick was unusual in that at that stage I was already sending sketches to you and getting your feedback. And the big note I still remember is we had determined somehow that the Grace kids were Irish. So I drew these red hair, freckly face, Norman Rockwell looking kids. You're like, no, not that kind. They have the pale skin and the black hair. And I was like, oh yeah, that's like, and so. And I just remember seeing those sketches. I put the sketches you did of them up on the back of like a door on a cabinet in front of me when I was writing. I just remember seeing it and feeling like I had an idea of who those characters were, but I felt like it somehow cemented by the art in a way that I can't explain. But just seeing them, I was like, well, now I've seen them. So you know how when you see someone, you know them in some way? Like I felt like that moment. I've talked about that a lot. Like you are getting to know that character, and the crazy thing is you can manipulate who that character is, because you're still at that kind of nascent stage where you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out who they are, how they operate, what their story is going to be, what
I'm
their arc
doing that
is.
right now in a project.
And so, so I do a lot of that, and you know, I'll do a lot of sketches, and those characters, I'll do a few characters, start with the protagonist, and then do a couple secondary characters, then maybe try to do a scribbly little scene or two where they're doing something, because you've got a little bit of an idea of
So
where
you
you're going.
go between the art and then the writing, and then the art and then the writing, like that?
It does to a point, and then I put all the sketches on the bulletin board, and I sit down and I go, all right, I think I know what this is maybe going to be about. I start outlining.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big outliner. I have done, you showed me index cards. I've definitely done the index card method. I've tried that before. I feel like the last few books, though, it's been bullet points with just an outline and bullet points. That way I can cut and move if I need to virtually. But early stages, actually, I like Post-it notes almost better than the index
They
cards.
can move
'cause
them around,
just
right?
Move them around, and you put those beats in, which is very Hollywood, I suppose. But I know that's how they lay a lot of TV shows and movies. When
So
they're
here's what my friend says that they do.
oh,
Okay. They have a magnetic board.
okay.
And then magnetic note cards that go on the magnetic board so you can write them here. And then put them up.
The card itself is magnetic?
Yeah,
And
like
is
a
it like a
whiteboard. It's a whiteboard
Tiny
cut into a like an index card shape.
And there's like, you get like loads of them?
Yes.
So we do a similar thing. We have a whiteboard with stickums, and we moved. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
There it is. It's all, and we use it for work. Like
Is this
all,
Kenny?
No, it's actually work. It's like where are we?
Oh wow.
Like where our projects
project.
are.
Let me just
where-
say, I'm obsessed with organization. I'm sorry y'all can't see this. I'm sure it's personal to them, but man, I'm super into it.
Yeah, it's where you can just all those things that are floating around in your head. You can just get it on a piece of paper. My our old studio manager Emily Rich was fantastic at organizing, and she's the one who instilled that, and we use it to this day. Yeah, it's really
I'll take
handy.
a little picture of that.
Yeah.
All right, so we
that,
got our things. You're sticky noting maybe on that board over there that all y'all can't see. And do you move stuff around?
I definitely move stuff around, and you know at that point you're doing a couple things at once. You're trying to figure out the plot, and then you're also trying to figure out the story.
Right.
And you're
Right.
also thinking how does this interact with the arc of the main character and then the secondary. How do their arcs play out? And then is there any sense of a theme? Like, and you know every book is different. And something will bubble up to the surface perhaps first. For this book, it was change. I was thinking about change because I was thinking a couple things. Very simple questions. A lot of time has passed since I wrote the first book. What if a lot of time has passed in the world, in Kenny's world, right? Okay, that could be kind of interesting. I kind of like the idea of like, let's move forward in time. How much time? I don't know. Let's go a few years. He's a rabbit. You know, how long do they live? So then I thought, okay, well, what changed? And then I immediately was like, I hate change. Like change scares me. Change,
No, sure, right.
change
No,
terrifies
absolutely.
me. And then I thought, is that applicable to an 8 or 9-year-old, like who I'm writing for? And then I thought, oh, that's when I was getting ready to. I remember the years counting down to leaving elementary school to go to middle school were terrifying for me because your bodies are beginning to change. Your school is going to change. The student body is going to change. Why are my friends changing? The friend circles are changing. Like everything is changing, and I can't. It's really making me very anxious.
Right.
So I'm telling this to Angela. I'm kind of walking around the house going, I think the next book is about change. You know, she's like, you know, maybe I don't know if that's enough. You think about it. So we go to the first parent-teacher conference for Sophia, our daughter, and she was now her school, elementary went to 6th grade, and then they go from 7th and 8th grade into middle school. So we sit down with the 6th grade teacher, first meeting, within minutes, he goes, so how's Soph doing with the change? And I'm like, what change do you mean? Well, you know, a lot of kids are very anxious when they go into middle school. There's a lot of change going on. And I go, tell me more about this. She's like, she's keeping me like under the table, and I'm literally asking him, so what do some of the students do to deal with the change? And I found it fascinating.
Did you just keep using the word change?
I did. But it was incredible. This is a person who's dealing, a teacher is dealing with all these different personality types every day, year after year, so he understood it. I finally told him after I'm working on a new book, and he said, listen, here's a couple big reactions that people generally have with change, especially at that age when they're learning to cope with it. One, they withdraw, which these things are no different than what adults do.
Right.
They push away.
Right.
So I don't want to feel the hurt of my best friend going to another school, so I'm going to push you away from me. That way I don't have to deal with it. They can become like ornery, just all around, just not in a great mood. They can feel like, why is everything always happening to me? And every single one of those things, I'm like, I'm going to do this to Kenny. This is how Kenny is going to deal with it. But the thing is, the twist is, Kenny's changing as well. He just doesn't see it because he's from the inside looking out, not the outside looking in. So those breakthroughs, like that's once you have, that's like a rock in the writing.
Yeah.
You're like, I've got a thing now, and I can talk about that thematic idea with the other characters.
Well, and this perhaps speaks to my experience, maybe more than your experience, but a lot of times I'm like, I've got it. And then I'm like, how do I do that in the plot?
Right.
And because I think it was really smart and interesting that you immediately went to, well, I have to figure out the story and I have to figure out the plot. And, you like automatically separated them. And I think that's something that it took me a really long time to understand.
Yeah.
Those are two different things.
Yeah.
And, you figured out the story, but then you had to figure out the plot. And the plot that did all of those things in a story that is still a fantastical story that is a romp, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a romp.
Yeah. It's meant to. It's lighter than Spiderwick. It's a more, but it still talks about deep philosophical things, right? But in its package, it's we're driving around popping wheelies in my old car. We're having a good time. It's fun. The colors are bright. It's easier said than done. You know that. I think. Well, for me, I could have the terms backwards. Plot for me has always been like chess moves. They go here, they do this, then this happens, then they react, and then this happens.
I think of it that way.
And then the story is like, well, okay, what is change? This is a story about change. How does Kenny change, right? So I think the best of stories that I've always enjoyed are where those elements intertwine and at some point affect one another.
Right.
And so the other thing too was a strong antagonist, which the first book really didn't have. It had like the townspeople that didn't understand Graham. It had George, but Kenny convinces George pretty quick. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. He finally convinces George, like, don't kill my best friend because you're my other best friend. So this one I was like,
a compelling argument.
But I thought, well, this one I really want someone who's like a true antagonist, but I want an antagonist who I'm like, the best ones you're like, I kind of see where they're coming from. Like, the darker parts of me go, yeah, of course. And so I thought, if this is a story about change, let's show a character who's unwilling to change. And how does that impact their arc? What will happen to them if they won't do what Kenny has to do? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you sit down, you got all this worked out, you sit down, you write it, and then it just goes perfectly, right?
No! No, you know that.
It's just,
horrible.
it just flows right out of you. You got the outline.
Yeah. Parts of it do, and then it derails horribly. It's just, it never goes right. We had problems with the magic system. We had a real pickle there in the middle.
I'm
of the
also
writing.
doing that right now.
Yeah, a magic system that feels bigger than the story, but really only needs to operate within the boundaries of the story. And can we wiggle it and break a rule? Because that's always fun too. That's Steve Berman is, as you know, and Steve is a beta reader and an editor who's worked with us for years, is terrific at really drilling down and really not holding back.
That's
doesn't.
very true. I hope you're watching this, Steve.
Yeah, hold back. This is for you, Steve. This virtual. So, that kind of feedback helps a lot. And I think over the years now, I don't know about you, getting critiqued still hurts. There's still a sting to it.
Sure.
There's still like, I got to go away and think about this. Okay, I'm cool with it. But I feel like if I have to defend something that it's not clear. There's not enough clarity to it. Or in defending it, I have to make it more clear what this concept is or what this element of the story is that I'm trying to, convey.
All right. So we worked together on this little project called Spiderwing. So how personally should I take it that this duology is the story about how totally inaccurate bestiaries are?
Ours is from life. Everyone knows that, right? Like, our bestiary is from life. This is the talking rabbits.
I feel like this is almost like your meta commentary on Spider-Man.
No, that's so good. Well, talk about it. Andrew's like, wait, you wrote another story about another magic book that holds a lot of mythical things. Like, you did that again? And I'm like, but this one's different. It's actually a magic book, and it's not about. Okay, never mind. I'm not just. Okay, so I became fascinated with bestiaries while working on. I mean, obviously, you knew I had an interest in them when we worked on Spiderwick, and I consulted through bestiaries. There's a few of them right here that I looked at.
Your interest in bestiaries begat Spiderwick.
That
predates Spiderwick by a long time.
But I think that the more I started to do research on them, because actually more and more of them are online now. You can actually look through old bestiaries. They've scanned the entire bestiary from like a 15th century bestiary now. You can go online, you can literally page through it. And so the more research I did in preparation for this book, and as a matter of fact, the Getty Museum out in Los Angeles had an exhibition on bestiaries. They collected bestiaries from all over the world. And I went out with some friends to go see it, and it was like unbelievable. I wanted to know why unicorns and griffins and lacruttas and some of these other animals were in multiple bestiaries for multiple centuries. And the reason is they were just copying one another. That's really the truth. They would copy and do their version of it, and they were just pulling information from other things. And on top of that, you may have an explorer or an adventurer bring back, a dead rhino or an aardvark or some animal from a far-flung land to England or to Italy or wherever they were making this bestiary, and it was stuffed horribly, like prepared bad, it had died, or it was alive but barely, and they're feeding it whatever, and it's not doing well. And so that affects the visual look of it. But a lot of those early bestiaries also had a religious component to them. Really, a lot of times they were very almost moralistic. They're like, here is the ant, and describe the ant, and then in God's world, this is what the ant, its purpose is, as said in the Bible. So it was really interesting to me that it was serving a lot of other purposes besides an encyclopedic purpose of this is a carpenter ant. They eat rotting wood. They can be found at, so I wondered the idea then of is the knowledge in them manipulative? Is it used to, is it simply negligence that has the misinformation? We set that up in the very first book where Graham's like, that's not right. It's like if you and I watched a movie where there's a children's book author as a character in the movie or the TV show, and you're like, dude, Elf is a great example. Elf, the writers and the way children's publishing is depicted in the movie Elf is so ridiculous. With Tyrion Lannister going, I want my money for my limo and my, I want a seltzer and all these things. And you're like, no, what? And he's dressed like a power broker and everything. You're like, no, publishing is not done like this. Pitch it to me right now. I want it now. Like that, Anyway, so there's a lot of that in it. So I wanted that the thing with the bestiaries, I wanted to really explore that inaccuracy. And I mean, look, we're living in a time right now where all facts and truths are being questioned, and we all can't help but wonder if some of these facts and truths are also being skewed to suit whoever is delivering said information. And so I wanted to touch on that. I didn't want to dive really deep on it, but I wanted to touch on that idea that just because it's written in a book or on a feed, that doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate.
Right, so here is that's exactly
totally 100% accurate as was told to us by the Grace Kids.
So here's my last question for you, which is about the art because you in Kenny and the Book of Beasts have to reapproach creatures that you approached in Spiderwick. Like you have to, and I was curious what kind of challenge it presented to make them, because you really do I'm missing the word, but like you recreate them.
They're stylistically
you
not
just
Spiderwick.
You reinvent
Yes.
them.
Yes.
And I was curious, how difficult was it to have these creatures that you already had figured out what they look like
Yes.
to you and say, no, scrap all of that, and let me rethink them from first principles?
A great observation. I wish I could tell you I struggled with it, but I think my brain is like, Spiderwick, we were looking at like Audubon and a lot of those natural history painters, and we were like, this is what a real griffin looks like. We've seen him depicted and illustrated and all these things, but a real one looks like this. Kenny and the Dragon is like a fair. They're cartoony. I'm looking at Harry Roundtree, a little bit of Arthur Rackham, not as much on these books. I'm looking at an editorial artist named Thomas Sullivan, who did great anthropomorphic animals. I'm looking at Milt Kahl and Ken Anderson, all the old Disney guys that did such great anthropomorphic animals. I'm looking at Beatrix Potter. And so they have a storybookishness to them. They're a little more cartoony, they're a little more exaggerated. And so my brain just goes, all right, so what's that version of a griffin look like? Or what's that version of a manticore look like? It's more
or the
like
unicorns, which are so cute.
So, but they're slightly Spiderwickish, and they're kind of goaty.
They're kind of goaty.
They're still goaty looking, but they're not.
They're totally different.
Yes, they're more deer. I looked at a lot of deer for them, so they're real slender and big-eared, and there's a scene where there's two unicorns, and in my mind as I was depicting it, I could just see the one unicorn just whispering to the other one. He has no idea what he's doing. Like, they're gossiping as unicorns are wont to do. But they're just very different than a realistic version of it. And I think that, you've known me a long time, and illustration, with Theo being an illustrator, yourself being a huge lover of art, especially fantasy art, you've seen the same subject depicted stylistically in a variety of ways. Dungeons and Dragons is a great example of that, where you can see the same beholder rendered like 9 different ways.
And it's always such a pleasure, but it's seldom that you see it rendered 2 totally separate ways by the same artist.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but I don't want to draw.
It's really exciting.
Oh, thank you.
But it also seems hard. That's why I asked, because
the hardest part for me was, so the difference between 2007 and now is I've got a little more structure to my working process for illustration. And the first thing I do that I didn't do back then, I started to do it on Spiderwick. Do you remember I would draw Jared, and then I would take a bunch of the drawings of Jared once they were finished, and I would cut them all up and put them on like a little grid. I don't know if you knew this. So
I do not remember this.
So this was so when I would draw Jared again, I had the previous drawings of Jared, so I knew how to make
like the parameters.
Yeah, okay, make his hair go this way, make his eyes go this way. Like this is how you draw him, so he looks consistent. Like he looks like the same kid from book to book. It was primarily driven by gesture, though. It wasn't a whole lot of structure. It was a lot of gut and just gesture. Like it's shaped like this, and it kind of goes like this. Now it's more structure. So when I went back to these characters and I looked at Kenny and the Dragon, the art is inconsistent in the way that, like, Kenny's drawn some illustrations his nose goes up, some illustrations his nose goes down. Graham's eyes drift to the side of his head and they come forward. So I'm like, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create structure in how I draw these characters, not unlike an animator. And then once I have those guidelines and I teach myself how to draw them, now I can draw them more consistently through the book. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go back and change the art in the first book, and my editor Justin was like, "That's not happening. You're not doing that. You're not. No, just get that book done. We're not going back, Tony. We're going forward, forward, not back. But it just go forward." So yeah. So it drives me crazy. To your point of like looking at the art and the styles, it drives me nuts.
Not my point, but I am very interested.
But I feel better that I got it off my chest, Colin. That's really. I knew I could tell you and you'd understand.
We're here to listen. So maybe some questions.
let's do some questions. Ange is here. Ange, you want to say hi?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. I'm here moderating for your pleasure. And so if you have any questions that you would like me to shout out to Tony and Holly, I am more than happy to do that. So let's take a look. We have all kinds of Drawn to Fantasy friends in the house. So as Tony said, shout out and thank you guys so much for coming and hanging with us. I know, hey, Kevin Sylvester. I know you guys had a lot of questions throughout, so I could scroll back through. Hello.
Would you like me to ask a final question?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, so this is a question that actually I was moderating for Cassie and someone in the audience asked it, and I love it so much that I've been asking everyone ever since my James Lipton end question, which is, what is the weirdest thing you've bought since the beginning of the pandemic?
What is the weirdest thing I've bought since the beginning of the pandemic? That's not pandemic related, I'm guessing?
Whatever you want. I bought some weird stuff. Weird stuff.
I gotta look around the studio. I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure.
Don't feel pressured.
There's no one right answer to this question.
You're at the pearly gates, and what do you say? Yeah, right? I have been buying.
Your recent hobby.
Yes. So you know, Holly, I have obsessive personality.
Oh, I do.
And my recent hobby has been historical photographs, specifically postcards that portray historical photographs. So I've been buying these postcards of Amherst, where we live, from 100 years ago, that show the downtown, that show everywhere, with like horse-drawn carts.
I knew your answer would be good. What?
And it gives me a weird feeling. I'm going to confess something that's a bit odd, but like the other day I offered to pick up food from downtown to go, and I brought a few of the postcards with me, and I stood in the exact same place where the photographer stood and did this for a really long time. Like a really, really long time. Just looking at it and looking at that and feeling, I felt the passage of time. Mm-hmm. And it was so, I don't even know how to put it in words how it feels. It feels like you're a speck, like you're nothing. It also felt like the pandemic would be over very soon, because in the big scheme of things, it will. But it's just I can't put it into words, that sense of feeling, and also the reassurance of all the buildings in our downtown some have changed, but a lot of them are the same. Yeah. They're the same. They've been there for over 100 years. And so I've been collecting that. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that's 1,000%. I started
good?
Bullet journaling.
You started what?
Bullet journaling.
Journaling about bullets?
No, I'll tell you later. It's a whole thing.
You're not going to tell everybody now? They're going to want to know.
They
know.
They know? They know. It's a whole thing, yeah.
Oh, I just don't know. So my next level for that is like, now I started watching YouTube tutorials on how they colorize old photos using Photoshop, which is really amazing. There's some artists out there that are so unbelievably talented. You swear the photo was taken in color.
I too have gone deep into the YouTube videos about bullet journaling.
Yes, yes. And just like, it's dinner time. What are you doing? I'm working. Kind of. But it's helped. I needed it.
But you know what? That is what allows you guys to go deep into world building and stories. Like the same thing that excites you to look like obsessively. I've seen your Pinterest boards, Holly. They are amazing.
We're just enabling one another. No,
oh my
I think
gosh.
in all the years, I have come to realize that the thing that makes me obsess about my bookmaking, that same personality trait will obsess about other things. It obsessed about Star Wars collecting for many years with Theo.
And repainting figures.
Yes, yes. How many of those do you see? There's like 3 of them here now. That's it, right? After years of like, I've got to repaint the thing. Funny story on that.
Are you sure? We have questions.
But it's a story that I'm going to tell it mostly for Holly. It will come at my expense, but Holly is going to laugh. So I was a customizer or a kit basher. I would buy the 12-inch Star Wars action figures, and I again, YouTube and other things, you would take nail polish remover, and you could take the paint, or the decos as they call them, and you could remove it from the thing, and then I would repaint the eyes and the hair, and I'd try to make it look more like Luke Skywalker and Harrison Ford, and Ange would help me because you knew makeup. You're like, he's wearing bronzer. You need to put a bronzer here and there. And I would paint these, and I would distress their clothes and make them look like little stop motion puppets. So, and when you walked into my studio,
they came out amazing. They were amazing.
Thank you. And so you would walk in my little nook in New York, and there'd be a row of them. I think. So now I want you to fast forward. We're doing the press junket for Spiderwick, and we're in an SUV with Kathleen Kennedy, and probably a high-up from Nickelodeon as well. Maybe Mark Wahlberg, the director. And Holly decides to be like, we were talking about Indiana Jones, because she was going to go work on Raiders right after Spiderwick. And Holly goes, Tony, you should tell Kathleen Kennedy about your dolls and how much you love painting your little Han Solo.
I didn't say it like that.
And I just was like, and Kathleen kind of like looks back.
Driver. Driver, stop here and let that one out, please.
It's worse that you didn't explain it.
What do you do with those dogs?
Yeah, you really left it out there.
Me and Indiana Jones just curled up at night.
All right, June Gallagher has a question. She wants to know, are you writing another story together again?
Man, we have talked about it. We have not quite figured out what that would be or when we would do it, but...
We went through a bunch. Like, we've talked about a Spiderwick book, then we've talked about a non-Spiderwick book, and then we had a long conversation about Sleepy Hollow. I was really excited about that, and for the anniversary, but that's come and gone. And here we are. And how many books are you contracted out now till?
I'm not sure I'm allowed to say.
But you're busy.
But yes.
You're busy, yeah.
Oh, speaking of, Linda Granger said, could Holly tell us about her new book?
Yes.
Holly can only say that. So I do have a real new book that's coming out in November, which is The King of Elfhame, Learn to Hate Stories, which is a novella, and it's illustrated by Ravina Kai.
You showed me some of her art.
It's really beautiful, and it was really fun to get to do. It's in the Folk of the Air series, and it gets to take one of the characters, Cardin, who we don't ever get to really see his perspective, and tell us a little bit more about him. So it was really a really fun project to do.
And did these just come out collected? Is this new?
So the Modern Fairy Tales, you can start to see these. These are the books. This is my first book, Tithe. And then Valiant and Ironside, I was writing around the same time. Ironside came out in 2007.
So that's a collected edition of all three.
That Kenny and the Dragon came out. This is what we were doing, our sort of side projects, or separate projects at the time. And this came out a little while back, but the individual new covers are coming out.
So pretty. That is so pretty.
And it has illustrations.
It does.
Kathleen Jennings. They're chapter header illustrations.
Is there K?
No, they're objects.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I wanted to do the cover for Tide when you first were doing it. Because we were hanging out so much then, and obviously...
Sure, you introduced me to Kevin. Yeah. You're the one who told Kevin to read the book.
Ange, that was all Ange, man. That was...
We
went away. Yeah, we went away. I feel like I was away for a weekend, and she read it. You had sent it. I probably went to like a Magic the Gathering thing. Came back from some conference, and she's like, Holly's book is amazing. It's so good.
I remember that you guys were like, your book was good. Not in the tone of people who were happy it was good, but people who were relieved it was good.
I'm sure you know that feeling now.
Never forget it.
We do not need to end our friendship. We can continue our... It was relief.
You're not going to finish library school. Like you were, and you came really close.
I came close.
I remember I'm like, you're not going to finish.
Cataloging, man.
There's a couple things when I think back on that. I remember you having me read Weetsy Bat. Because at that point, so this has got to be 1999 or 2000. Really early in the aughts. And you're talking about YA, and I have no idea what you're talking about. All I could think of was Go Ask Alice. Like, I'm like, that book? And you're like, no, you need to read like Weetsy Bat. So I read Weetsy Bat, and I was like, this is for kids? And you were like,
it changed so much. And I mean, I remember when I didn't know too, because it really was super different. than anything that we had. I mean, there was some stuff that hit that category, but it was not a category. It was individual titles that sat in that space.
So many. I think back on that, Holly, how you saw that coming from miles away.
No, just stumbled on in.
I don't know. I mean,
Oh, I remember having the conversation in the car coming from, we were driving through Jersey, going back into the city, and like you telling us all these ideas you had for young adult books and being like, this is like Anne Rice for teenagers.
Yeah, I remember that. That's the only thing I could relate it to. And do you think...
Wait, they have questions.
Oh,
Okay. Just, well, you guys are both here. A big shout out to Topher Bradfield, who is here from back in the day. Topher is here. And he's saying, will there be a return to Spiderwick? So he's ready for it.
You never know. We have big hopes that Spiderwick will be back in the world in a big way soon.
And
Or
and
not.
We got ideas. We got thoughts.
Ideas. Yeah, we kicked some stuff around.
Kind of too many ideas.
Yeah. We'll just keep kicking that can down the road a couple more years.
Amelia Pendleton says, what was your process working together on Spiderwick?
So I think what's interesting to me about that was that we didn't really, like, we were kind of making it up as we went along, right?
Yeah.
And I think that most people who wind up embarking on a project like this don't know each other and certainly don't know each other super, super well.
Yeah.
I mean, this was Tony's project. And I was super into fairies.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I could do a little
You were doing research on the field guide. Yeah.
I'll just do a little research for the field guide.
We had a lot of same. You understood it, and I think because we had such similar childhoods, you saw the DNA in the field guide because you were a huge fan of Brian Froud and Alan Lee's Fairies.
Fairies. And gnomes.
Remember
Gnomes. Fairies is right there. I can see.
Fairies is here.
Right there. Which, if you have not seen, it is so incredibly beautiful. It is Brian Froud and Alan Lee hanging out in Devon in the 70s, painting some extremely scary fairies.
So unbelievable. So Brian Froud, who would go on to work with Jim Henson on The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, and then Alan Lee, who would go on to work on that trilogy of films. What was it called?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So here they are in the 70s, just bringing fairies to life in a way that had not been done probably since Arthur Rackham.
Blew both of our tiny minds.
Right? And I would say that, and then the other big piece of the DNA puzzle would be this little book right here that you also... I mean, that is Spiderwick DNA. Sure. There it is. Those are the two things that really have a huge influence on it.
I remember going over and over that book. It felt like a bestiary. It felt like a magic book.
It did. And you were helping me doing all the research. A couple key things, though, I mean, what people may not know is we just tried to sell this. This is all we wanted to do, was sell this. We just wanted to make us big field guide.
So when did you decide to do the side project, the field guide? That's the project.
That's it, yeah. And so a lot of, this is an expensive book to make. It's an expensive book to buy. And the publisher, Kevin, the editor, kind of ran it through the group, and they were like, it's cool and all, but we don't know if we can sell this.
Write some little books to go with this.
Yeah, what's the story behind the book?
This is he stone souped us.
Again.
Into the entirety of the Spiderwick Chronicles.
Yeah, because all I had was Arthur. Basically Arthur Rackham guy who could see him, and then you came in and you were like, let's modern kids.
How about these three kids?
There it is. That's how we did it.
And then, he just stone souped us through that thing. He was like, and then what if we put them out first? And we were like, but why? When you could put out this beautiful
field guide. No, we got to put the little books out. And he was, you know what? He was right.
Guy knew some things.
He knew some things. There were things we didn't plan on, though. I mean, Harry Potter was starting to hit phenomenal levels, but it hadn't quite hit it yet. I remember, because we were touring like right after J.K. Rowling would be touring. We'd have like the same people.
Because they came out in 2003. It was early summer 2003.
So what book would that be for Harry? That's like the third book, maybe?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I think, yeah.
Lemony Snicket those books were becoming very popular.
The fifth was definitely not out.
Yeah, no. They definitely were coming out because I remember us being on tour and them saying, this is J.K. Rowling's last tour. She's not touring after this. We're like, what? Why? Why would she do that? Everyone loves Harry Potter. They're like, you don't understand. It's like bananas. And so I think what happened, the fortune that we weren't thinking of at all was that as those books were becoming denser and bigger, younger kids were craving similar genre, fantasy,
Right.
and the Spiderwick books kind of fit that. Because really, we took kind of a complicated story and just broke it into smaller, episodes, with those books.
Jubal Gordon says, are you going to do a story set in Amherst? Would you do a story set in Amherst?
Oh, wow.
So I started writing a book set in East Hampton.
Nice. That's a great
So
town.
yeah, so sort of,
Yeah.
but it's the first time that I have done. I've gotten closer. I did a book set in Springfield too.
Nice.
Cool.
It's tough.
Cold
Yeah.
Town.
Yeah.
Cold Town is in Springfield.
Coldest Girl in Cold Town? Is
That's Springfield.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Um,
It's tough because Amherst has got, it's home of Emily Dickinson. I think that's going to be a hard thing to surpass.
Well, and you don't always write contemporary in
No.
that way. I mean,
No.
like Kenny, is not in a. I mean, he's in
Roundbrook, which sounds like a town around here. Right?
Seems right. It's a totally.
But it's totally here. Like the picture, the landscape is the landscape of Amherst and South Hadley, and the Spiderwick books reek of Amherst too. I mean, you moved up here during the process. I was doing all the art up here. I'm looking at trees and everything up here and drawing them. So it's got a lot of Amherst in it.
David May asked, Holly, what's next in Elfame?
I'm trying to figure that out now. I have a project that I want to do before I really work that all the way out, but I have some ideas. I have been writing in fairy now for a long time, stepped away, came back. I've now accepted the fact that I will be writing in fairy for a long time going forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You've always been passionate about that.
And it's been fun. to
Hence
come
your
back and
title,
get some
The Queen
stuff.
of Fairies. I mean, come on.
Goal achieved. What special things did it unlock?
Kate Blair Wheeler says, Tony, if you could draw illustrations for any of Holly's non-Spiderwick books, which would it be?
I mean, there are sketches of Kay from Ties. And Rath Royben Rye.
Man, you should put those up if you can find them. People would be like, what?
Yeah, probably. I don't think they're that good.
They wouldn't. That's not why.
I remember though, even
I'm sure
thinking.
they're fantastic. I totally don't remember them.
You don't
though.
remember them.
I do
They were
remember.
Asian.
I remember
made Kay
them,
Asian.
but I do not. She. Yeah.
Was she Asian in
she
that
was.
book?
Yes.
Okay. That would be why.
And I remember them, but I don't remember them. If you know what I mean. Like I can sort of remember the piece of paper and like the thing, but I can't see the characters.
I remember too us doing a weird Hieronymus Bosch Bruegel version where you and I were messing around on the computer where we were just taking existing art
Because
and
Greg Spolenka did the Boschian cover. And
Yes.
so I
Yes.
thought
yes,
yeah.
maybe beforehand we were like
Right,
looking
right.
at stuff. I probably have it all on the hard drive still, but those I've loved. I read what were they called after the whole? I read the trilogy you did afterwards, and I met not Valiant.
Curse Workers?
The Curse Workers. I read those, but I like the fairy stuff more than the Curse Workers series. I think because we were hanging out so much at that time, so I can feel
That has
I
a
know
lot
that
of the DNA of those times.
I feel that '90s Jersey and
And New York,
New
in
York.
Valiant,
yeah. You know that. I know that. I could draw it very accurately, having lived through it.
Let's see. Okay, so Joanne Lone says, is there a secret to world building?
So here's my perspective on this, that in fact, there is a secret to world building.
And David May is also asking your favorite and least favorite thing about world building. So
And I think, okay, I mean, I think it's something that you spoke to when you were talking about, again, story versus, not versus plot, but the difference between story and plot. And that's that a magic system has to be thematically right for the story. Like, you think about creating a world, right? But it can't just be a world that is super cool and it has, where all the rules line up and where everything makes sense. It has to be the magic system and the world that is right to torment that character the most they can possibly be tormented, right?
Yeah.
And it has to be also story generative. Like I as I was creating this new magic system for this adult thing that I've been working on, you know, I made a lot of decisions that were cool, but were shut down story. And I had to go and pick it back out and like recreate it in a way that made more story.
Right.
And I think that those are the two things that I did not learn for a long time that have made the most difference to my understanding of world building.
And that's hard to come to that conclusion. Like that's a tricky. That doesn't come easy. That's really.
And I think we do often understand it when we're doing it, but we don't actually understand it. We don't understand what we're doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
Like we don't
yes.
always intellectually understand
right. The process.
why it matters that this doesn't work, but that does.
Yeah. I think it's so funny as you were describing it. We've been watching *Handmaid's Tale*, and I think Margaret Atwood, that world that she created, is a perfect example of tormenting the protagonist and also creating a world that is super story productive. It you know, it's terrifying and scary, but it really speaks to as an example of what you're describing. I think Harry Potter, obviously. I mean, that's another one that certainly torments the character along the way. Golly, I don't know what I think the vastness of it is probably what can be tricky.
I hate coming up with all the names.
Oh, that's
Everything needs a name. The streets need a name. The coins need a name. Everything needs a name, and it needs to be the right name, and it needs to. That's right.
Mimi does not like that part. That's her least favorite part of world building.
No, the names for me are easy. I just use like usually one of my dogs going there. Of course, it wouldn't be a live feed without the dogs going ballistic. My favorite doing names is easy for me. Here's what I do. If it's a name of a character, I do name meaning this. Like at that point, I kind of know what I think the character is about, so I'll do that. Then the other thing I do is I look, if it's got to be a weird made up word that's not a real name, then I look up the root of a word that describes them. So like what is the word author? What does it come from? What's the Greek word that it's from? And then can I mutate that to make a name?
So what do you do with the street names and the coin names and the
kind of the same thing?
King's names from back when, and then the king's names from more recently, and then it's so much.
But sometimes, or just you just don't even think about it. You just kind of rattle off King Robert of the da 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 da. You know, you just kind of rattle that up, and you go, I'll write that down, and then you're like, I just need to tweak a word or two. No.
That's where I waste a lot of time. I spend a lot of time there.
Doing that.
And like, what about this name? Oh, it's not quite the old one. What's the trick to world building?
I mean, you kind of said it. You know, the biggest thing is world building takes second tier behind the characters. That's always the trip up. Is that you spend all this time creating this world, and you're so excited about all those street names and the names of the coins and all the way the world works and that it gets in front of the characters, and it can't get in front of the characters. It's got to be behind the characters. That was definitely with that was tricky in the Wanda books for me. And I would say the part that I hate was with the Wanda books. Because they exist in a world where the protagonist doesn't know a lot of real world things because they don't exist in her world, I had to describe them as a narrator in such a way that the reader quickly understood what it was, but indicated that we're now in a time where dogs aren't around. She saw a furry creature you know what I mean? Like it was exhausting at times to try to maintain that and not just wear the reader down. I cut a lot of it, and I probably should have cut more.
Okay, I'm scrolling through. Okay. Oh, Kevin Sylvester says, does Holly draw or even concept art for her work?
I draw just badly.
You can draw. You're not a bad artist, Holly. You're good.
I grew up with a mom who is a painter, and so I am both a person who has learned to draw more than stick figures, and also a person who's extremely aware of how badly I draw. But to go back to something we talked about before, bullet journaling, which is basically it is about making your own planner.
Okay.
Is a lot about drawing.
Okay.
There's a lot of drawing in it, and so it's been really fun for me because you're not trying to draw necessarily well, you're just trying to like kind of have fun and have a creative space and use a lot of washi tape and like, and it's been fun to actually do that and to not try to make it great, like not be intimidated by how many truly great artists I know.
Yeah, you've worked with and know a lot of. You have an incredible art collection at the house.
It's all very beautiful.
Amelia Pendleton asked, "What does a day as a writer look like? What's a day as a writer look like? What's your average day, Holly?"
I think that the challenge when you are writing professionally is that a lot of times it can feel like your job is to check your email and to respond to a lot of things, and it's very hard, I think, to explain how much administrative stuff there is and how much you're going back and forth on, you know, covers, and you're going back and forth on copy for stuff, and you know, marketing plans and announcements, and all of the different, like, you know, the small, like, you're going to come over and do an interview, and so, like, what is the timing on that, and what are you doing, and you need to have it up on your Instagram, and you need to update your website, and I think that it's really important not to have that stuff be your job, and remember that your job is actually to write a book, because when you're doing that, like, say I'm writing, you know, I do go by word count, and so, like, I'm trying to get 1,000 words a day. And it's really easy to be like, well, let me do all of the administrative stuff that's time sensitive. And then with whatever time is left, I'm going to have to make 1,000 words. And I think the big challenge for me is to try and put the writing in front of that administrative stuff, because there's no one waiting for it, or they're waiting for it, but they're waiting for it like 6 months from now. Yeah. So each day, it feels like you're not really you're moving forward incrementally. Yeah. And as you're going, a lot of times I'm finding stuff that's wrong. And so it's often very frustrating. I find first drafting incredibly frustrating. I find it very hard to get into a flow state. Yeah. I like revising. That's my space of, you know, my place of power, where I feel like, okay, I understand what I have, and now I just have to make it better. I don't know how well you achieve that sort of flow state where you're just in it and you're writing.
It's like that. It usually kind of fits in spurts. So I may get like 3 or 4 days of really productivity, and then all that stuff you talked about, I've kicked that can, and then it's a day of dealing with that. But that's not bad necessarily, because it lets me go away. And then what I was going to ask you is, you know, I don't necessarily try to hit so many words a day, but I try to write until I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day. And then I go back the next morning and I read it, and I go, oh my God, like half of this stuff I got to throw out and rewrite, because it's not as good as I thought it was when I was getting it down. Or I've over-explained something that can be done in a sentence.
Well, so I have a really hard time putting to bed my inner critic, right? Yeah. That's why I can't get into a flow state. And so I am trying more and more as I move on in my career to not go back and look, and not, because that's what I'll do all day. Yeah. And then I'll be in that critical mindset, and so I need to try and keep moving forward, even if what I'm writing is not good, because a lot of times I'm going to throw it out anyway. Yeah. Later, when I realize the whole thing doesn't belong there. So I'm trying to move toward the end. I realized a couple years ago, I was swimming in Puffer's Pond with Cassie and Kelly, and Theo was on shore, and he would keep trying to get in, and it's cold in Puffer's Pond. It's a pond. And he would get in, he would get cold, and he would get out. He would get in, get cold, and get out. And I thought, and I just sit in the cold until eventually my body goes numb, and then you just enjoy it, right?
Yeah, that's how it's done, Holly. That's what you do.
I looked at him on the shore, and I thought, that's how I write. Oh. I get in, I get uncomfortable, and I get out. And I need to be the person who sits in it until my limbs go numb. And then I can just write. And that is my current struggle. That's where I am.
Wow. You don't outline, though. You're not a big outliner.
Oh, I do. You do. I'm just wrong. I'm wrong. I'm getting better.
But you usually travel and often write. So, but now that you're not, you can't really travel now, is that making things more difficult for you?
You know, I think it would. But what's really making things difficult for me is that I have a 7-year-old who's like, hello! I'm like, hi. And he's like, can I have a drink? Can I have a sandwich? Yeah.
We watch this. Yeah. That's
Mom,
hard.
I want to play a game.
Yeah. That's hard. It is, though. It's it's hard. It's
It is.
heartbreaking to turn them around and push them out of the room. Because you're like, no, I gotta go be in my imaginary world that I've built now and try to write a story out of it.
It is hard. It's really hard, and so so what I do is I stay up all night because in the night no one can find me.
You've always been that way as long as I've known you. It's bad now.
It's full bad.
We would go on full tour. We would do events all day. We'd go back to the hotel. I couldn't wait to eat a club sandwich and go to sleep with food in my mouth. And you'd be like, all right, time to write. And you would write into the wee hours. I don't know how you do it.
Valiant, man. That book was due. That was due. And I think that's also it, is that, when things are due, they're due.
Yeah.
And you spend a lot of, you could sign up a bunch of stuff, and it all seems fine. And then you're like, Holly of the past, what's wrong with you? But Holly of the past was like Holly of the future. She's got problems, but it seems good to me.
That's a great, okay. What would 1999 Holly think of where you are now? I mean, as your friend, to see the things you've accomplished is unbelievable.
I can't. I don't think I could really imagine it. I talk a lot about and about how when I was a kid, I remember people saying, if you believe you can achieve it, you can achieve it. And I thought, I don't believe that. I don't believe it. I know I don't believe it. So does that mean I can't have it?
Yeah.
And I was talking to people about, you can just do it. You don't need to believe it'll work. You don't need to, in fact, better you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, right? The more you dwell on that stuff, the more, but I could never have believed that this was my job, that I had been able to do this job for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And that I'm still doing it. I don't know how you feel or how you would have felt being a kid, and, because you were...
It's past whatever I daydreamed about, Holly. It's past that. To have a nice home, to be able to pay the bills, to come up with worlds and draw pictures of dragons and manticores and rock and roll fairies. It's so, and to make a really incredible, I'm very thankful is really what I'm left with, especially given the state of things in the world right now, and that we can make a living, doing this as our job. I feel very fortunate, and I know it's a lot of hard work. I know you put a lot of hard work in. It's like a weird mix of hard work and being at the right place at the right time, and there's luck and everything else, and I acknowledge all that. There were people that worked harder than I did. There were people that saw bigger success that just were in the right place at the right time. I
think about that a lot. I think about all the people I know who are better writers. The only thing I could really say is that, when people ask me for advice, I can give a lot of advice because I've made every mistake that you could possibly make as a writer.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest one is assuming that hard work equals success, and it doesn't in writing, in books. It just doesn't always equal that. We didn't, to lead up to Spiderwick, I did The Spider and the Fly. I dedicated it to you and Theo because I thought Holly and Theo are probably the only people that I can think of in the world who would like this book. I don't think this book is going to sell. I don't think people are going to like it. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And when we created Spiderwick, we thought no one's going to like those little chapter books. All they're going to want is the big field guide. And again, wrong.
Right. I think, the more, people say that the universal is in the specific. And I think that often the more you can please yourself as a reader and a viewer, the more actually universal it is.
Yeah. I think that a lot. I try to think of, what could I write that I would have loved? I say that a lot, what would 10-year-old Tony love that old 50-year-old Tony can now make?
Yeah, definitely when I was making the Pearl Prince books, I thought these are some weird books that I did not know if people will like these at all, but
you
okay.
would have loved them. You would have loved them.
I wanted to make them,
would have loved them. I think that's it.
Sorry?
There it is. What do you think, Ange? We call it a night?
I think you guys have answered a lot of great questions, and from what I'm reading, you've inspired a lot of people.
Aww.
So it is so great to see you guys here together, because I always love our creative conversations with Holly. It is so great. And to have, you know, now almost 25 years of friendship behind us and have the perspective of so much together is like, I mean, to have that kind of tried and true friendship with someone that you've gone through so much with them, it's just so meaningful. And I feel so thankful that we have a friendship that is just so strong and can always be returned to.
I feel really thankful to him. This is my friend. And, you know, I was thinking when you were saying that 25 years, you know, now we're the old guard. Like as you were saying, like, how would you look back and see yourself? And I think, wait, because the thing is now we're the people. Now, we're the, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Holly,
I don't see myself that way, but I know that's what it is.
You would have gone from Jersey into New York City to go to your book signing now 25 years ago.
You would have. And you would have been like, she was wearing this cool shirt with unicorns on it.
She's wearing she's wearing these cool boots.
I got my bestiary.
I know,
outfit.
I love it. Like, does that come in like a men's?
It does. It actually came, I didn't know this, it came in a men's first. It's from Pretty Snake.
Ooh, well,
You would like
Oh, his stuff's awesome.
Yeah, that's
cool.
Great. That's awesome. Holly, I can't thank you from so many.
I would come and hug you.
I know.
But we're not
allowed to do it. We're not allowed to do that.
Maybe in 2021.
Yeah, 2021. Thank you so much for coming out, for reading my book, and all your endless support of my books and
Well, thank you. And would you like to tell us how we should be getting Kenny and the Book of Beasts?
Kenny and the Book of Beast is available wherever books are sold, so you can support your local independent bookstore. I was at the Odyssey Bookshop earlier this week doing an event. I also signed books at High Five Books in Florence, which is a pretty cool place. And, of course, the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. They all have live links. And they are so close by that I can actually personalize. So if you order your book from them, they'll call me, I drive over, and I write, to Holly, best friend in the world, love Tony, and off it goes. I'll be continuing to do events throughout the fall. We got Unlikely Story with Jeff Kinney's bookshop. I'm going to be going to I'm going to be doing events with Diane Capriola's Little Shop of Stories down in Decatur, one of my favorite stores. I'm going to be doing an event with Blue Willow Books out in Houston, Texas. And Mysterious Galaxy, which is another great, fantastic shop out in California. Anyway, so if you could support a local bookstore, that would be amazing. They need your help more than ever. But, if you need to order it online and have the Amazon drone drop it off, that's fine too. Before we go, Angela, you should pick who's going to be the lucky winner of a signed and drawn-in Spiderwick Field Guide.
You know who I'm going to pick for this, because he has been a fan for a very, very, very long time. He's actually been coming to your events since he was a child reading Spiderwick.
Wow.
And so all these years later, I think a signed copy,
we need to drum roll?
Absolutely, for Micah Miscreant!
Yes, very nice.
Micah, you are awarded a signed copy
Spiderwick
of
books.
Arthur
Micah,
Spiderwick.
Make sure you send us your mailing address so I can put it in the mail for you. And Anne, do you want to cue the music and see us off?
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for hanging with us today. This evening. This was awesome.
This was awesome. It was great. For all my Drawn to Fantasy fans, Ange and I will definitely be doing a Drawn to Fantasy event and probably in the next couple of weeks. We've been talking about it. We'll come and draw for you guys. Be safe. Be well. Hang in there.
As always, shout out for our music to Tom Hoffelder, our theme song.
I know.
Isn't this awesome?
Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Be well.
Thanks, Holly, for coming to hang with us.